Hello, my name is Bradford Slim, and my project was on generational age of physicians in relation to AI and education. While we each are individually unique, we tend to share commonalities. And this includes different age groups known as generations. People tend to have similar childhoods due to the environment they're raised in, as well as shared experiences of events. And this can lead to expectation gaps where there are different degrees of disagreement among such generations about what is considered the proper way. And to go into the specific generations that were analyzed within this project, firstly, there are the baby boomers who were generally found to be more dependent on teachers and processes. Not only that, but they were adults around the emergence of computers, and they tend to adopt new systems easily. However, they are more hesitant when there are technological issues. So, for Generation X, they are born before the emergence of computers. However, some were also adults at the time, and this is due to Generation X being more of a sandwich generation, so to speak. And not only that, they tend to learn independently as well as on the job, and they tend to be more results-oriented. And the same can be said for the millennial generation or Generation Y. And they were born around the technology boom or the emergence of the internet, and they tend to gravitate toward team-based and hands-on learning, and they tend to turn to the internet rather than experiential learning. And such has been found to occur in physicians in these studies. And this project is based on the work of Moore, Williams, and Boysen. Moore found that older generations are more hesitant to accept new technologies. Williams found that differences in physician generations affects how they behave in a learning environment. And Boysen found that there is a learning gap that millennials need to be taught differently and than older generations are accustomed to, and that such can be remedied for older generations by exposing them to more technological changes in the workplace. However, these studies focus on physicians broadly, and I want to hone in on specific aspects of how physicians work. And those two being AI usage and education on new medical advancements. The process of staying up to date is relevant and important, as it is required of physicians to maintain their license, and it can help determine the quality of healthcare for patients. However, the methods they use to learn about such processes is up to the physician, and there are a lot of resources for them to choose from. And AI, in turn, merits its own importance, especially today. And this leads to my knowledge gaps. Firstly, I wanted to know how the generational age of a physician can be associated with their choice in resource. And secondly, I wanted to know if such generational ages can be associated with AI usage in their practice. And my objective was to look into such topics by creating, dispensing, and analyzing an original survey. My hypothesis is that these questions would hold up to be true in both cases. I created the survey, I translated the data from more qualitative answers into more categorical data, and I analyzed as well as graphed the data. My mentor, Dr. Ahmed Salim, helped guide the project, and he helped format and distribute the survey. For my methods, over the course of 23 weeks during the spring, summer, and fall of 2024, I worked on the project. I developed an original survey that wasn't based on any other studies, and the survey was sent to 140 physicians from the Pulse Heart Institute, and only 48 responded. The survey itself was 11 questions long in order to encourage participation, and the majority of the questions were multiple choice or long answer questions. However, if we needed to know the reasoning behind their answers for the multiple choice or checkbox questions, long answer questions would be used as a follow-up. And the survey was split into two parts. The first part was a section that was focused on the demographics of the participants, and the second part was intended to get at my hypotheses. And generally, the questions 7 and 10 were meant to address hypotheses 1 and 2, respectively. And I would like to clarify that question 7 refers to staying updated on new medical advancements. Questions 9 and 11 were follow-up questions, and questions 6 and 8 became vestigial over the course of the project. Similar answers from the survey were combined, and this was especially true for long answer questions due to the fact that different participants could be saying the same thing but wording it differently. And then the general answers were assigned a number, and these numbers weren't based on the amount of people that responded, and it was purely just a means of categorizing the different answers. Data Classroom was used to visualize and to analyze the results of the survey, and the results were analyzed with the chi-square test of independence. For my results, generally, in terms of demographics, as you can see on this table, the majority of respondents were male, and the majority of the respondents were white or Asian/Asian American, and most of the respondents, either at the time of answering the survey, worked in community hospitals or in private practice, and generally, most of them worked either as specialists or general practitioners at the time of responding to the survey. And here is a graph representing the resource choice of physicians in relation to their generational age. The x-axis represents the generational age, the y-axis represents the total percentage of respondents, and each colored square represents a different resource, and the width along the x-axis represents the different age ranges, and the length along the y-axis represents the percentage of the total amount of respondents the resource takes up. And it was found generally across the board for all the generations that journal articles were the most utilized. Social interaction and medical society meetings, which are basically conventions for physicians, were found to be the second most frequent in the millennial and baby boomer age ranges. And medical society meetings and online meetings were found to be the second most prevalent for Gen X members. And the data was found to have a p-value of 0.63. Now for the AI section of the project, the graph shown follows the same rules as the graph shown before, and it was found by a very, very large margin that most of the physicians responded with not applicable, meaning that they don't utilize AI in their practice. And it was found, though, in the groups that did respond yes to utilizing AI, that baby boomers and Generation X have a more similar reasoning behind their usage than millennials. And the p-value was found to be 0.53. And I would like to say that while random sampling wasn't applied at first. Eventually it was used to confirm the data, and the different p-values found was 0.91 and 0.39 respectively. Not only that, but questions 8 and 10, which are what prompted research and whether or not AI was used, respectively, were eventually found to not be important and were not included in the data analysis in order to keep it simple. And not only that, but the long answer question regarding questions 7 and 8 was also compared to generational age. However, not much could be gleaned from the results, and there was not much evidence for there being a relationship. And furthermore, there was a design error within that question that caused some confusion among respondents, and thus the question was not considered when analyzing the data as well. Both hypotheses were found not to be supported by the data, since the p-values were closer to 1 rather than 0, and if they were closer to 0, and I mean like really close, then there would have been more evidence for a relationship. However, even if it was a p-value of, say, 0.39, that would still indicate little to no evidence for a relationship. And this could mean that age simply doesn't play a role in either resource choice or AI usage, and it could be due to other factors like the efficiency and accessibility of such resources. And not only that, but since the studies that are the basis of this project, since then, there could have been more exposure to technological changes within the workplace and society in general for all generations, which could also account for the results. There were some limitations to the project. Firstly, there could have been more respondents. Not only that, but there could have been more diversity among the respondents, not just in terms of age and race, but also in terms of what career they are in and where they work. And there was, like I said earlier with that long answer question, there was a design flaw in that question that caused some confusion. However, it did not hinder the entire project and mostly just hindered that one question. In terms of the future, one could repeat this study but take into account the limitations mentioned prior. One could also explore how millennials or Generation Y could further affect the workplace or the school space, especially in regards to technology and AI. One could further look into the relationship between physicians and AI, and one could also look into how schools could interact with the different generational differences and age gaps. Firstly, I would like to thank Dr. Ahmed Slim and the participants from the Pulsar Institute. I'd also like to thank David DeGrow, Annie Emery, and Colin Top from Bellarmine Preparatory School. And I would like to thank the Marine Chemistry class of 2025 for supporting me and for helping make the marine chemistry experience unforgettable. Here are my citations. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Mac?
Why did you use the chi-square test for independence?
The question was, why did I choose to analyze the data with the chi-square test of independence? And the reason why I chose to use that is because the data we were working with was primarily categorical in nature, and the chi-square test is best suited in analyzing the data. Any other questions? Right. Oh. Yes?
If this study was to be done 20 years from now, do you think numbers would fluctuate a lot, or would they stay relatively the same?
Okay, so the question was, in the future, years from now, would the results remain the same? And I would say I can't really say, because a lot can happen in a few years. However, I do believe that the results will stay consistent as, like I mentioned prior, further exposure to technology as of now has helped unify generations in regards to technology. However, things could change. Any other questions? Oh, yes? Yeah, Rutindo.
Could you expand on the p-value, more specifically how you derive your data and also what it means fundamentally?
Okay. The question was if I could expand upon the p-values and what the p-values mean for the data. Essentially is, at least with the results shown, like the specific p-values, that there is no evidence of a relationship. And that was the primary aim of the project, to determine if there even was a relationship present. Because in determining what kind of relationship would require something closer to an experiment, and this was more of a correlational study, or focusing on just the natural occurrences within physicians. And with, does that answer your question? All right, any more questions? All right, thank you very much.